Simon Nicholls is a concert pianist, teacher, researcher, translator, and the author of the Notebooks of Alexander Skryabin, published in 2015 by Oxford University Press as Scriabin's Death Centenary. Together with Michael Pushkin, he fully translated Scriabin's notebooks from Russian, making them available for the first time to the English-speaking audience. He is also the vice chair of the Scriabin Association in the UK and currently teaches at the Birmingham Conservatoire. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much. I should say that I'm now retired from the Conservatoire, but I am very proud of my association with them, which went on for many years.
Could you tell us how you discovered Scriabin's music for the first time and what sort of impression it's left on you?
Well, when I was at the junior department of the Royal College of Music in London, my teacher, whose name is John Bustow, set me the left-hand nocturne, which I loved playing and which, as you know, is extremely effective and grateful to play. And I loved the sounds it made and the way it felt to play. So that was the beginning. And he gave this interest a further push several years later when he was recording some Scriabin for the BBC. And he needed a page turner, and I turned his pages. And I just remember being completely wrapped up in the sounds of the Sixth Sonata, one of the strictest Scriabinesque compositions you can possibly have, and being completely spellbound by it. So I think the seeds were sown well and truly by that time.
So how did you come across Scriabin's notebooks? And when did you decide to translate them into English?
I first read them in the translation, which is very good, by Marina Scriabin, Scriabin's daughter. Then I also read the German translation by Riesemann, and I realized that the translations that existed in English were very fragmentary and not very accurate. And so I thought this would be a very good thing for the Scriabin centenary to bring this out. I think we just missed it actually, 2018 or something, but I asked a Russian scholar, Michael Pushkin, to help me, because I was pretty certain that I understood what was being said, but I wanted it to be a really reliable translation, and people tell me that it makes more sense than most other attempts that have been made. And I just wanted the sequence and the growth of his thought to be made available to English-speaking readers, because it made such a lot of sense to me, the way it grew.
Yeah, so in Scriabin's early years, we realized that his compositions were mostly inspired by Chopin. That's why he wrote so many preludes. But later on, he moved away and developed his own style and harmonic language. What do you think brought about this transformation?
Well, you know, it's like a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Which came first, the desire to expand or the visions? But I think that he became more aware of other composers, of Liszt and of Wagner, and especially of a piece like the Mephisto Waltz, the famous one by Liszt, which has this great sensuality of melody. And this clearly, the experiments of Liszt, Scriabin doesn't write about this, but the symphonic poems and the octatonic scales used by Liszt, and of course used by Rimsky-Korsakov in his magic operas. I think that these sounds are very intoxicating ones even now, and they're actually there in Chopin. Chopin was one of the great harmonic innovators, as you know. So if you play the Polonaise Fantasy, you know that there are extraordinary sonorities there, quite an emphasis on the octatonic scale. And I think Scriabin was an excellent player. He had a terribly good ear, strong imagination, and I think these things worked on it. Then at the same time, he had many ideas he wanted to express in music, and he couldn't go on writing little nocturnes and preludes and waltzes, really. He had to move on from that.
Yeah. So Scriabin, he died at the age of 43 and left us with an incomplete mysterium. And what impact do you think he has made on music history?
Well, this was discussed at the conference I attended recently, and there's a little bit too much emphasis, or has been, on the idea that Scriabin was the end of a kind of tunnel or a kind of cul-de-sac. But actually, he had an enormous influence on the composers in Russia after the revolution, the immediate generation after the revolution. And I think with the two tendencies going on at that time, the populist one with RAPM, the Society of Proletarian Musicians, who wanted everything to be very, very simple, a little bit like the situation we have in England. That was one side, very simplistic. The other side, people loved Scriabin's music, and it was played a great deal. The pairs and funds used to play in factories, and they would say, which would you prefer to hear, the Poem of Ecstasy or Tchaikovsky Symphony? And they would say, Poem of Ecstasy. And so I think that the Minister for Education at that time, Lunacharsky, was very clever and very wise when he said, a bit like Beaumont in that poem, that Scriabin was the stormy petrel of the revolution. And so this music went on being played, and however much the system tried to squeeze down on music that was being written at the time, they had most of the time in front of them, and very well played too, these amazing pieces that did not end in the tonic, went all over the place, were very fantastical, were sometimes regarded, especially the last period, as elitist, but were always there in the Russian mind. And in this country, Scriabin had a tremendous vogue in the 20s. And English music was really very parochial and insular at that time. So Henry Wood conducted Schoenberg, and this was a tremendous shock to the English. But there were a lot of performances of Scriabin in the 20s, and I think this also leavened our lumps, you could say, livened up the scene quite a bit. So he, I think, had more influence than has sometimes been admitted.
Yeah, recently I just found out that there is another composer, an English composer, that's actually enjoyed his 150th birthday this year, is Vaughan Williams. So at my next, at my Scriabin recital, I'm going to play one piece by Vaughan Williams as the encore. Pair them.
That's a nice gesture. Yes.
Yeah. So most of us know Scriabin as a fine composer for the piano, and he composed a little bit for the symphony orchestra as well. But could you tell us more about the other side of him as a poet, philosopher, and also his fascination with theosophy?
Well, it's the roots of this are various and they go back very, very early. So Scriabin's favourite present, apart from having a piano, when he was a little boy, it was a toy theatre. And he improvised dramas, tragedies in verse. And he also made scenery. So he was visualizing and he was thinking in words. And very often he would kill off all the characters before the requisite number of acts, which I think is 5, had been gone through. But this was an early attempt to create an imaginary world which did not depend only on music. And then he wooed really his very beautiful girlfriend Natalia Sekerina with an amazing series of letters which are full of thoughts, philosophy, and not unconnected with this, I think, is his idea for an opera libretto where the hero, who is a composer, poet, philosopher, who could that be, turns the head of a beautiful princess with his wise thoughts and great poetry. So he was very aware of the power of words, and he wanted to convey inner worlds. He was very enthusiastic about Wagner when he started writing for the orchestra. And if you look in Wagner's book about Beethoven, he says that Beethoven adds words where the music stops. Some of us might think it's the other way around. Anyway, he has this wonderful hymn to art there, where he says that art can change the way that people think. And this was always his intention, to change people's view of the world, to change the way that they thought. Then he went on with the notebooks, developing his thoughts, and that goes along very much with the language changing in the music. So he writes about exaltation, about flight, and all these topics are there in the music for us to find. And when he is interested in Nietzsche, you can hear the Nietzschean aggression and self-confidence in the music. I often think of the 2 poems, Opus 32. First one, very sensitive, very inward. Second one, very assertive, strong, quite aggressive, and it says confiducia. So this is belief in yourself, I think. So it's a sort of inner and outer self-portrait. And now, who is to say how he came across theosophy? But he wrote and said that I'm reading this amazing book, The Key to Theosophy, which is a kind of summary, like a catechism of what theosophy is. And, well, it was a very fashionable and very prestigious movement because Blavatskaya claimed to be making a synthesis of art and of religion and science, and saying, yes, science is not wrong, but it's only part of a very helpful, thoughtful thing for intellectuals who had great difficulty with the orthodox religion, but at the same time needed some feeling of the divine. And Scriabin falls exactly into this category, having rejected God completely because he felt he'd been tricked by God and by hurting his right hand so that he couldn't perform for some time, although he did, of course, get that back. He was very disillusioned with what had previously been a very devout faith. So he went from one extreme to the other, and Blavatsky was something to hold on to, as it was for many people. And as you know, if you look at the Secret Doctrine, the big work that she wrote, he annotated it very, very carefully throughout. They have that in the Scriabin Museum, and you can pick it up anywhere and find his little notes, which are very, very interesting.
Yeah, certainly. Like this world, I feel is growing more and more fragmented with specialists in all sorts of art forms and areas, and it would be really nice to have an integration through this festival, even.
Yes, yes, that's right.
The next question is well, as the vice chair of the Scriabin Association, can you tell us about a little bit more about the conference, the Scriabin 150 conference that was held in the UK in September 2022? And I believe it was conceived and organized by Kenneth Smith and Mark Richards.
That's correct. Yes, and this was a wonderful combination because Kenneth Smith is a professor of music, and Mark Richards is a very senior figure in a school, a very prestigious school called Queen Anne's School in Caversham. So we had really very beautiful surroundings and buildings and grounds, which certainly helps. And the school has very good facilities, so electronics, people coming in on Zoom and giving talks, and us wanting to have diagrams and so on screen. It couldn't have been done more helpfully. And we had, I think, people from 5 countries. Of course, nobody from Russia, and the Russian conference had people only from Russia, which is very tragic. Perhaps one day we may hope that might change. And a marvelous combination of performance and lectures and theory. We had performances of at least 5 of the sonatas, many of them within a lecture, but also we had a fine concert by the resident pianist of that school, who played wonderfully early works by Scriabin, including the 3rd sonata. And it had to be done so that there were 2 talks going on all the time, and one had to make one's choice as to which to go to. But I believe that Kenneth is going to bring out a video for us, and then we can catch up.
That'd be something to look forward to.
Yes. So also not just looking into the past, but there was a very creative young man, very much in touch with the latest technology, who did some wonderful light shows. We finished with Bella Flum, with amazing light shows. So that was very encouraging. This music, which is 100 years old, not more, and this latest moment technology collaborating very successfully.
Yeah, just
so
thinking.
Very inspiring, very joyful occasion for everybody. Everybody was fired up.
Yeah, just thinking back to Scriabin's death centenary, that was 7 years ago, I believe. A film was made at the top of Himalayas, and
Yes.
I had been actually in touch with the filmmaker, and he'll be editing and will be premiering his his film 7 years later. at the 150th. I think that's really special.
Yes, I remember it well. It's very spectacular. Very
Mm-hmm.
spectacular.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and of course that's where Scriabin imagines his mystery.
I
Very,
know,
very.
like 100 and 150 years later, we're doing it for him. And
Yes.
he's helping us improve the world. So, just talking about our festival patron. I understand that our festival patron Alexander Serafimovich Scriabin, he passed away, but you were in communication with him just shortly before that. What can you tell us about him, your memory as a friend and
Oh, I can tell you a great
honorary
deal
president?
because yes, he did kindly agree to be the honorary president of our Scriabin Association. I don't think he spoke any English or very little, but his wife Anna spoke quite a good deal. And I first met him, I think, in 2007. I was in the Taneyev Library, which is the reference library of Moscow Conservatoire. And we had the senior figure there was Yevgeny Alexandrovich Zhivtsov, amazing scholar, very serious man, but I think a kind man because when I came for about the third time, he got Alexander Serafinovich to come along and meet me, and I didn't know anything about him. Very imposing figure. He looks like, or he looked like the military members of the Scriabin family. The Scriabin himself, was very delicate. He was not like the other people. And Alexander Serafinovich immediately produced this book, which was the Nizhny Novgorod Miscellany, which he had just edited, and he wrote in it for me, and immediately started talking about another book that he was going to publish and asked me to write something for it. And this is what he was like. He, well, first of all, he knew I was serious about Scriabin. He said, now, the wise Nizhny Novgorod, important for Scriabin writes it well, and oh, that's right, that's right. And so before I knew it, really, I was having a lovely tea with him and Anna in the Golden Vasa Museum, where he was the chief of that association, and we were discussing everything. Shakespeare. When I lost the thread, Anna would say, "Now we're talking about cooking." Then I would sort of catch up with it again. Um, and and so then we were always in touch, and I asked him some questions. He provided answers. He provided some amazing materials. Um, very very generous, and always a very positive presence. And then he has brought out book after book about Scriabin, about other figures of the period, especially Alexander Golden Vasa. So these are all extra sidelights on that time. A marvelous, as they call it, as Zbornik, a miscellany, an anthology of articles about Scriabin. Very important source book, actually. And then, yes, he confessed to me that he was a smoker. He said, "I'm a propagandist." He said, "I know this is a bad old communist word, but we've got to be propagandisti." And certainly he was tireless when he was a smoker at some stage. Then, not so long ago, he said, "Anna and I have both bought tricycles, and we're exercising every day." Wonderful. But he did get COVID, and in Russia they don't like to give injections. I think their Sputnik injection was rushed out very quickly, and so they would they wait until people have got it, then they give them medicine. Well, Alexander Skryabin went down quite quickly, and I think the night before he died, he said, you know, it really gets you down, this disease. I feel quite broken down. He said, at least my head's working. And I thought, well, I'll write to him in the morning. But in the morning I heard that he had died. So very much a person not to forget, a person to remember very vividly and with a lot of gratitude, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. The Scriabin Society of America also recently came back to life and invited for this festival. We invited him to be the honorary president as well. And he was preparing to actually record greetings message for this festival. Now, yes, a short film in his memory will be put together by his.
Very good. That's
excellent. Yes. And
he made many videos for the Scriabin Museum, and you get this wonderful dynamic of two young researchers, and Alexander Skryabin holding forth, and always got some new book in his hand he's either received or that he's published. Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, Simon. So a bit about myself. I'm a pianist and a cellist from New Zealand, and since 2019, all of a sudden I've been organizing music festivals and concerts in New Zealand, combining arts and poetry. I'm not quite sure where that came from, but I just started doing it anyway. So I feel particularly close to Scriabin in this regard. And in the last year also, I also wrote about, well, actually over 300 love poems from my favorite composer, and to whom I dedicate this 150th celebration. I hope he's happy about it. And so I hope the world can see his brilliance, and with his music, we can bring about harmony and peace in spite of the current situation.
That's a wonderful hope, and I certainly share it. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.